Today on CityCast Chicago, what's next for the Bring Chicago Home referendum, revisiting our most romantic places to cry crossover, and Joe's end of beginning has been stuck in my head all month long. To talk about it, executive producer Simone Alicea. It's Tuesday, February 27th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. Morning, Simone. How you feeling?
Good morning, Jacoby. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm coming off a pretty eventful weekend. I was out in these streets, as they like to say. Got over, did some speakeasies and sort of inspired by our conversation from last week. So I popped up on Lazy Bird in the Hoxton, slid by Gino and Marty's, both of those in the West Loop. But I also got out saw a spring flower show, Sweet Gnome Chicago at the Lincoln Park Conservatory. So
I'm so excited for that. I'm so excited for the gnomes. I got to tell you.
I really appreciated that. Sometimes the spring flower show, I'm not sure exactly how much they do, but they'll sort of change the arrangement, but it feels like they just planted a bunch of gnomes around, and I still found that cool. The whole time I was like, I hope there's a contest to guess how many gnomes are in here. There is no contest as far as I know, but I thought that kept me engaged the entire time trying to count.
Well, you and I know how many there are. So, if anyone out there wants to try to guess, let us know. Shoot us an email, chicago@citycast.fm.
Well, one big story going into the weekend that I know we were following very closely is the future of the Bring Chicago Home referendum, which we had been talking throughout this election season, that this change to the real estate transfer tax to get a stable funding source for homelessness efforts in the city. You kept reminding me week after week there were going to be not only a lawsuit, but there were going to be a number of ways that people are going to be fighting to get this removed off the ballot. And one of those came up on Friday. Can you kind of catch CityCast listeners up?
Right. So as a reminder, the Bring Chicago Home tax would raise the real estate transfer tax. So it's a tax when a property is sold on properties over $1 million, and it would reduce it on properties under $1 million. And we're set to vote on this on the March 19th primary. A lawsuit was brought by real estate interests, different business groups, arguing that the measure was not worded correctly, that it had too many, that it was doing too much, that by lowering the tax and raising the tax, the city couldn't do both at the same time. On Friday, Judge Kathleen Burke ruled in their favor and essentially declared the measure invalid. And the state of things now is that while the Chicago Board of Elections, which was the defendant in this lawsuit, is not they're not going to remove it from any future ballots. Early voting has already been ongoing. People have already gotten mail ballots. But basically what it is that as it stands right now, votes on the measure will not be counted. That said, this is already it's getting very complicated because very likely there's going to be an appeal. Certainly advocates for the measure have said that they expect there to be an appeal that hasn't been announced yet or filed yet as of Monday afternoon. If the appeal goes through, then it's possible that those votes could be counted. So it's sort of a complicated thing of you are still going to see this on your ballot. If you're early voting, if you're voting by mail, you can still vote for it, but we're not sure yet if that vote is going to count.
Yeah, the exact language in the order is the defendant board is ordered not to count and suppress any votes cast on the referendum, which when Alderwoman Maria Hadden comes out and says that powerful special interest groups are trying to undermine democracy and suppress the vote, it's hard not to believe that's exactly what's happening when that's the language in the order. And we said the entire time this was going to be a battle between big money developers, real estate interests, versus a campaign that's been on for 6 years. I mean, it kind of takes us back to our original conversation of just how difficult binding referendums are. And one of the reasons we haven't seen one passed in over, 130 years?
Something years, yeah.
It's for reasons just like this. How do you think, that appeals process is likely to go?
We'll kind of have to see. One of the interesting things about this case was, right, that as I mentioned, the defendant in this case, the only party listed, is the Board of Elections. The plaintiffs, these business groups argued that the Board of Elections essentially should have objected to this ballot language, should not have printed the ballots, with this language on it. The city tried to intervene to say, actually, we're the ones who should be defending this measure. We wrote the measure, right? Remember, city council passed this language to appear on the ballot. And the city said, we should be the ones who should be defending it. And as part of this order, the judge disagreed. The judge said, no, I'm not going to grant that motion to intervene. And so I think that I actually think that in addition to sort of the main legal question of is this ballot written correctly? Can the city actually do both these things at the same time? Raise the tax on some real estate sales, lower it on other real estate sales. I think there's also going to be a question of, did the judge do the right thing in not allowing the city to intervene? But again, we haven't yet. The appeal has not yet come down, so we're going to have to kind of wait and see.
In Judge Burke's order, did she give a clear reason why she ruled against the Chicago Board of Elections?
No, there weren't. She did not detail the reasons for the order. It just said, for the reasons stated in open court and on the record, which is a little bit frustrating, I think, because if you recall on Friday, as the story was breaking, I think even then there was a little bit of confusion, even, from reporters who were in the courtroom who were like, were there reasons that were given? Obviously, of course, the plaintiffs have their reasoning, right? They have presented a case that the judge has ultimately sided with, but we didn't actually get those kind of written down, which I think it's just really frustrating and confusing and feels it certainly doesn't feel transparent at the very least. And it also just sort of makes this appeal, sort of, what is the appeal going to be? It just kind of makes that, even more confusing, I think, to watch, of just okay, so what are we actually arguing about here? What are the issues here that we're going to be watching for?
From one of the biggest stories in Chicago in February to one of the most viral moments or montages, as some would say, the song In the Beginning by Joe has been dominating my feed all month long as I've seen it cut across Chicago cafes and river walks and parks. But I'm gonna be honest, the song is fire. For as much as it's being hyped up on TikTok and growing, and I think 57 million streams in February alone. Simone, did this song crowd your feed as well?
Not even a little bit. I had no idea what you were talking about when you first brought this up, because number one, I am not on TikTok, and sometimes it takes a while for the actual trends to get to Instagram. So I'm hoping you can show me a couple so I can see what you're talking about. Should we watch one? Oh, this one is, wow. It's very summertime shy, lots of boat pictures, food pictures, Lala,
it's
farmers markets,
rivers,
ice cream. Sorry, I can't hear you because this song is so loud in my headphones.
So this is just one of those things that I feel like I saw a lot of people, we've seen like CBS and Sun-Times write about in the last week. I think from the start of February, this has just been one of those songs that I think has racked up like 14,000 different posts. And what's great about it for me is wow, I see all of these people's montage that I can kind of relate to and understand. I love that for me when I hear this song, my montage of Chicago is still always like riding my bike up Ashland from 83rd Street to 95th Street, and seeing that big church on 95th and Ashland is always like Dan's Hot Dogs and Home of the Hoagie and 35th Street Beach and things like that. And so I love that everyone has their like version of Chicago, whether it's the people who've been posting who just visited for the summer or people who live here. Britt Julius actually reminded me of this song last week because she's also a DePaul alum, alongside the actor Joe Keery, who people might know from Stranger Things, this latest season of Fargo, which dude. Dude snapped. He was cold. He absolutely delivered. And man, to know he had been playing in clubs like Sleeping Village and Empty Bottle and Shuba's when he graduated back in 2014, it's kind of cool to see him at this moment, even though, he don't still live in the city.
That's so wild that he and I were in college around Chicago at the same time. That's so bizarre to think about. It's such a wistful song. If like Rat Hole was the viral moment of January, the Chicago viral moment where your friends from out of town keep sending you reels and stuff about it. This is a much better one, and I hope this is what people are getting in their inboxes instead of more Rat Hole content. And like you said, Curie cut his teeth on the city's DIY indie music scene, and there's still like a lot of that stuff going on. Actually, our marketing director Caroline Patton wrote a little guide to booking a gig at places like Sleeping Village, Empty Bottle. She also runs the Chicago show calendar, so you can check that out if you want to see shows by local artists. There's lots of open mics around town. Reggie's near Chinatown does one. There's also something called the Unsigned Showcase that does a monthly show up in Ravenswood where you can see local unsigned indie artists. And so, maybe you can find the next wistful Chicago song to be the background of all of your Chicago memories.
Yeah, it's definitely giving late 20s, early 30s vibes in Chicago. Man, I ain't gonna lie, this song just been stuck in my head now for weeks.
Well, that's the other thing I like about the song too, because it's end of beginning. It's about like, it sort of is reminiscent of when he is here on the scene, like I said, cutting his teeth, learning the music. And then, of course, he gets a lot of success with Stranger Things, ends up moving out to LA for both the acting and music stuff. And which is like, I think, a story that a lot of Chicago artists really can resonate with, of like, this is the place where I learned how to do the thing that I'm going to do. You know what I mean? It's one of my favorite things about the city.
One moment straight out of our newsletter that kind of had its own viral life last week, which is our Venn diagram that you put together, Simone, of best places to cry and most romantic spots. These places were given to us by CityCast Chicago listeners. Hey, Chicago readers.
So here's what happened, right, is we put out a call out asking for people for the best places to cry earlier this summer. And people had a lot of opinions. A lot of people like to cry on the CTA, we learned. And then earlier this month, around Valentine's Day, you and I kind of spitballed some romantic spots. We also spoke to a photographer about some of the best spots to get engaged around the city. So I included that in this list. And I was realizing there's like a lot of crossover. And I think part of it is just like a lot of them are like places like the Art Institute or Grant Park or Millennium Park. Like they're kind of just big places that a lot of people know. But like the CTA made both lists, like the Lakefront made both lists. The Garfield Park Conservatory made both lists.
And then, people sort of responded on Twitter, had things to say in the comments, in the quote tweets about places we missed, places they loved. I definitely agree with some of the places that should have been on there, including Sox Park, taking somebody to a White Sox game where you may see a great game. You may see a great fight. You definitely gonna get some good food while you're there. And very, very cost effective, especially when they ain't playing well.
The Sox Park tweets were specifically, this is a good place to cry. Are you saying that it should be both?
Like, it's a good place to cry as people relate to, so many stories between will they move, how they're playing.
Yeah.
But I also think I've been on some great dates to Sox Park as well. And it ends up being a very cost-effective date. But some other South Side places, Southeast Side, you got Wolf Lake and Big Marsh Park. On the Southwest side, I think, again, crying romantic, Auburn Park Lagoon, the Dan Ryan Woods, both of them kind of serve real easy places for either activity. So there's some great crossover in this list.
I was like trying to figure out, I was like, what is it that all these places have in common? And it's like a good place to have big feelings, I think, is the concept here. Although I will say, most of the people who responded on Twitter mostly responded to the places to cry element.
Yeah. A lot of people play Cry Bingo. in the
Yes.
comments.
Yes. Playing crying bingo, having cried at several of the places listed. Not a lot of suggestions for new romantic spots that we should be adding, which makes me a little bit worried about our listeners and readers. But, it is what it is.
I mean,
We're
if
all
you think
going
back
through
to the
it.
top story today, it's a lot of things to be crying about.
You know what I mean?
We like to bring the good news, but we also keep it real.
One of the ones that I really liked, and I actually had to put this into Google Translate because it was in Gaelic, was somebody mentioned the Bridgeport Castle, and this is the one where the owner, the original owner, had of this home had sort of built. I don't know how else to say it. He built a castle like onto the home, around it. You can see it's got these like towers and stuff. And it was a display to honor the owner's late wife. And so that was a place that was, I think was a good one that could have been on both lists that I hadn't thought about. So that was a really good one.
I think this Venn diagram is a reminder that any suggestions we get, so many of them come from you all, whether you are leaving us DMs, whether you're leaving us texts and voicemails at 773-780-0246. But we also try and get your answers to the Hey Chicago newsletter, try and pull the things that you put on Twitter. And so please continue to interact with the podcast and newsletter, especially during these call outs. And you may hear your thoughts end up on the podcast. I want to give a huge thank you to our executive producer, Simone Alisea. Simone, thank you for making time.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
Before we let you go, for more CityCast Chicago and Hey Chicago, check out our website, chicago.citycast.fm. Today, you'll see things like our best free and discounted classes, 3 questions on the late Mayor Harold Washington. And of course, if you go to the events page, we got things for you from tonight all the way through the weekend. So make sure you check it out. And of course, I got some good news. It wouldn't be Chicago if we ain't keep the restaurant weeks coming. And Greektown Restaurant Week kicks off this Friday with discounts and special dishes throughout the neighborhood and some of its historic restaurants. You can check the show notes for a list of participants. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading, and most importantly, being back here bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace. Back in Chicago, I feel it. Another version of me, I was in it.